Har Baba ki jai. Not- Sanjay ji, are you in a position to read?
Yes, I
Seven,
can.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
can.
yeah. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
The seven realities: existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following. The real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. The only real love is the love for the infinity, God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God. The only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of love, all things, body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. The only real surrender is that in which is that which abandons
Only
even
renunciation. Please start from four.
yeah.
Repeat
The
four. Yeah.
only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand, without expectation of reward. When compelled to take part in a dispute, act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred. Try to make others happy and with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, even in even those who harm you. The only real control is the discipline of the senses to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. The only real surrender is that in which voice is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned, perfect calm, the will of God. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Har Baba ki jai. So we are we have finished the all the themes and all the chapters of discourses. And we actually are doing something interesting. We're going to take part two, which is the part where Baba, after the Sahwas, does a series of discourses every afternoon. Uh, and this is covered by Don Stevens in Listen Humanity. We feel that these chapters make a good extension to the discourses themselves. When I say discourses now, I'm saying discourses the book. So it's a good extension to discourses the book. We believe that after we read each chapter, let us also see where that chapter fits in the themes and among the chapters of the regular discourses, and see what we are trying to do is for a serious reader, right? For a serious student. And a serious student is less worried about form, but he's more worried about content and absorption. So if you look at it from that perspective, what we are trying to do is anything that helps us understand Baba and Baba's messages more clearly, Baba's discourses, Baba's knowledge that he has provided, right? So, with that in mind, we will read each of these chapters and hopefully find the right place for these on our board so that the next time we read discourses, we can actually extend these chapters and go to part two of Listen Humanity and read that as well, right then and there. So it's a good attempt. I hope it's helpful to everybody and helps us also understand things better. Any comments before I start?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah. Tama, it's your idea. Any thoughts? Anything that I missed? Okay,
Jay Baba,
so
I think, sorry, it's a good compliment. I think, what can I say? It's Baba's grace that I think it will just complements whatever we have read of discourses, Jay Baba.
yeah, Baba. So if you just to see the contents of Listen Humanity, the first part is the Sahvas program. This is just a personal account, very moving, very nice. And then part two is Life and the Path, where which is what we are picking for discourses. Then you have a section on avatarhood. Maybe we can even take Baba discusses avatarhood to extend the theme on avatar and perfect masters for us. But the rest of it is mostly a personal account. So if you remember the background for this book, Baba asked Don to write this book, right? So, and these discourses were actually given during that Sahwas. So, in that sense, the focus of this book is more a good account, actually a very beautiful account, by the way, of what happened, rather than focus on the discourses. Just to get the context right. So, with this introduction out of the way, let's jump straight and get to the first of the life and path chapters, death and immortality. Okay. Anybody wants to read first, or I can read for some time and then rotate. Yeah, let me read. Chapter one: Death and Immortality. Sar Meher Baba ki jai. The immersion of the individual in the routing of life causes him to be seriously disturbed by the sudden experience of death, particularly when it takes away someone who has been near and dear to him. When the sight of death becomes too frequent, as in time of war or during an epidemic, the individual's mind tends to protect itself by retiring within a shell of habit and routine. Familiar actions, phases, and surroundings, which require no thought or adjustment, become at such times a buttress to his emotional balance. But even this
Karthik, your
wall,
screen is not visible. So,
oh, okay, thanks for pointing it out. Are you able to see it now?
yeah,
Okay. The immersion of the, I'll start again from the beginning. So it's just one para that I read. The
that's not
immersion of the,
needed. You continue from where you left. The audio is there.
okay, yeah,
Maybe.
okay. Yeah, it's okay. I'll read it again. The immersion of the individual in the routing of life causes him to be seriously disturbed by the sudden experience of death, particularly when it takes away someone who has been near and dear to him. When the sight of death becomes too frequent, as in time of war or during an epidemic, the individual's mind tends to protect itself by retiring within a shell of habit and routine. Familiar actions, faces, and surroundings, which require no thought or adjustment, become at such times a buttress to his emotional balance. But even this wall of cultivated indifference crumbles when the hand of death snatches away someone who has entered deeply into his inner life, someone who perhaps acted as a pivotal point upon which his emotions turned. At such a time, his unquestioning attitude towards life is disturbed, and his mind becomes deeply preoccupied with an intensive search for lasting values. The life of each person is deeply enmeshed in this mystery of death, but it is a mystery which which accents thought instead of dulling it. For, if anything, makes a man think intensely about the true nature of life, it is the recurrent theme of death. As the tale of life is told, it pauses frequently to contemplate the gaping holes left by death. There is no way to avoid the thought provoking impact of that inescapable presence. Although none escapes the intensive search for the hidden secret to the meaning of death, few can lift the veil and unravel the mystery. For most, it remains a soul searing enigma which causes deep restlessness. For some, it offers a wide field for imaginative speculation. For the few, it yields its secret. Any thoughts, any comments? I'll just pausing. A lot has been said. So, key things that's being mentioned here by Baba is the concept of death is something that is enigmatic, something that absorbs a lot of time from the human, especially when he faces it up close and when a near and dear one is lost to death, right? That's when it starts, and then obviously he becomes deeply engrossed in thinking about it, right? Let's continue. Many refuse to accept death as the simple, final extinction of the individual, but this reaction is more often a form of unreasoned wish than a matter of unshakable conviction. Even so, this instinctive rebellion should not be lightly dismissed, for much of the vigor of this blind protest against the seeming fact of death springs from an obscure but still functioning intuition. However, this intuitive reaction does not approach the more secure position achieved through reasoned belief based on faith in the authority of a seer or on the direct perception of those who know. When a sensitive individual is first faced by a death of deep significance in his circle of close friends, he is usually struck by the transitory nature of all forms of life. Confronted by the undeniable impermanence of the body, yet unfortified by knowledge of some sustaining permanent principle, he often falls into a mood of deep despair or supercilious cynicism. If life is inexorably doomed to extinction, he reasons there can be little meaning in the frantic efforts to achieve. In turn, this thought leaves him in a vacuum of purpose, which may lead him either to a state of supine inaction or may precipitate him into reckless rebellion. To him, existence seems to be conditional, intermittent, and vanishing, while extinction appears to be unqualified, inescapable, and permanent. So in discourses, if you remember, Baba uses the term vairagya, uh, temporary vairagya, smashana vairagya, where you become very aware of the impermanence of life when someone around you, close to you, passes away. And that's when you become more aware, more aware of God, more aware of trying to do good and questioning all the things that are around you in your life, right from what is right, what is wrong, and how you should treat life and how you should deal with life and so on and so forth, right? Let me continue. When such a grim conclusion has been reached, whether consciously or unconsciously, the individual is tempted to rain death and destruction upon others or to invite it upon himself, merely because death appears to be more lasting than life. The recklessly destructive desperado and the determined suicide belong to this type. They cannot accept life as having any real value because their initial unthinking faith in the value of life has been uprooted by the rude shock of death. If death is accepted as real and longer in duration than life, then life is degraded below meaninglessness. Even then, such values in life as truth, beauty, goodness, and love can claim some intrinsic worth despite their fleeting existence. But in practical fact, all keenness for the pursuit of even these momentary values is gradually replaced by a sense of hopeless apathy, for one hears constantly a background whisper which says that they too are doomed to vanish one day. If the cat, while stealthily drinking milk, knows that someone is waiting outside their door with a club, she can hardly relish the flavor of her surreptitious meal. Similarly, a man who comes to know that all his achievements must soon be brought to naught can hardly have his heart in his efforts. If he stops to reflect that all the people he loves are earmarked for early conversion to dust, then his spontaneous enthusiasm gradually dries up and he is forced to consider what he is striving for. If he tries to cling to those loved ones despite his new awareness, all the desperateness of his ensuing efforts becomes only a sacrifice to vanity. In order to avoid the pain which he is bound to feel at the inevitable loss of his dear ones, he may try to avoid life by adopting the viewpoint that the living are no more than on a par with the dead. The success of such a game depends upon an exact equation, for if he holds the slightest preference for the living, he will be gravely affected when the living become the dead. He is forced finally to face the fact that if death means the extinguishing of his beloved brothers in a blind vacuum of eternity, then the entire game of life is a meaningless tragedy. All courage, sacrifice, and loyalty to ideals become a farce, and all vital seeking takes on the cast of empty endeavor, of much effort without purpose. Fear of loss treads closely upon all earnest attempts to appropriate and inherit the significance of life, depriving it of all sweetness. In short, if death is looked upon as mere extinction, man tends to lose his balance and is plunged into perpetual gloom. All his dreams of the enduring reality of truth, beauty, and love are refuted and seen by hindsight to have been a blind groping after illusion. His previous ideal of eternity and inexhaustible sweetness, instead of filling him with hope and enthusiasm, now reproaches him with the utter senselessness of all earthly values. Thus, death, when not understood, vitiates the whole of life, and the first impulsive answer of inaction or cynicism, which the individual usually forges to meet the question, strands him in a thoroughly desiccated universe of unrelieved weariness. Nevertheless, this gradually prepares him for another attempt to find a more vital answer to the inescapable query. The human mind cannot endure such a stalemate for long, as there is an internal force which insists that the inner nature be in motion. Eventually, the pressure for such motion breaks through the rigidity of such a negative concept of death. A great flood of new interrogation and discovery often breaks out, and in it, the key question now posed by death becomes, what is life? The answers supplied are countless and depend upon the passing moods which spring from the deeply rooted ignorance of the interrogator. The first instinctive answer is life is that which is terminated by death. The answer is still completely inadequate as it involves no positive principle on which a fruitful life can be based, nor can the individual's need for development be met. Such an answer explains neither death nor life. The individual is driven to try to understand life and death along new lines. Instead of looking upon death as the opposite of life, he now inevitably comes to look upon it as the handmaiden of life. He begins to affirm intuitively the reality and eternality of life. Instead of interpreting life in terms of death, man seeks to interpret death in terms of life. Slowly, event by event, he learns to take life again in all earnestness, with a deeper affirming consciousness. As he does so, he is able to give a more constructive response to the recurring sight of death. The challenge of death is now not only accepted and absorbed by life, but is met by a counter challenge. What is death? It is now death's turn to submit itself to critical scrutiny. Please feel free to stop me, discuss anytime. The most unsophisticated answer to this counter question is death is only an incident in life. This simple and profoundly true declaration to the this simple, I'll repeat, there is this simple and profoundly true declaration, the unendurable chaos precipitated by regarding death as the extinction of life. There's a missing is there. This simple and profoundly true declaration is the unendurable chaos precipitated by regarding death as the extinction of life. Soon, it is clearly seen that it is futile to try to understand death without first understanding life. As consciousness gradually settles into this balanced approach to the problem, it takes on a healthy tone, which makes it receptive to the truth concerning both life and death. Direct, undimmed knowledge of such truth is available only to spiritually advanced souls. The seers of all time have had direct access to the truth about life and death, and they have repeatedly given a suffering and groping humanity useful information on this point. Their explanations are important because they protect man's mind from erroneous and harmful attitudes towards life and death and prepare him for perception of the truth. Although direct knowledge of truth requires considerable spiritual perception, nevertheless, even correct intellectual understanding of the relationships of life and death plays an important part in restoring mankind to a healthy outlook. Above incarnate life in birth and death, above incarnate life in birth and beyond discarnate life after death, the soul is one indivisible eternal existence. The gestation of individualization of the soul begins with the evolution of its consciousness. Consciousness begins to evolve in incarnate life, and its evolution becomes complete only in incarnate life. So, what is incarnate life here? So, incarnate life is from the gas form. So, it's basically anything after Om point.
Incarnate life is, I mean, yeah, for soul's journey, yes. For the life in the physical form, actually, yes, you're right.
So everything from Om point onwards is examples of incarnate life, and in that incarnate life, you go through the journey of evolution of consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way to understand this. Any other thoughts? Okay, let's continue.
It's in body, yeah. Incarnate
Yeah,
means body, yeah.
yeah, incarnate means body, but I'm saying it's not. I mean, it starts from the gas form, so it's basically everything from Om point.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
for the enlightened souls to understand. For us, it's, I mean, it's just
No,
the
no,
life
I know what you mean.
from where we are born, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we are incarnate, yeah. Yeah, Baba.
Yes, yes. Jai Baba, Jai Baba. I
Because it is
continue.
talking about death and life. So we are at the moment, I think it's better to focus the human life here. Yeah.
Correct. No, no. Yeah.
I mean,
Specifically, why
yeah,
I asked was
of
it's not
course, death
just
of a stone and
reincarnation.
a death of a metal. That's also there.
Hmm.
I don't know,
Correct. Correct.
but so
And of course, the animal forms. The animal
yeah,
forms grow
yeah,
through
they
go through a clear experience of death.
yes, yes,
And yes, so it's probably difficult to relate, like you said, to the
yes. That's what I meant.
death of the early forms.
Yeah, yeah,
So, in the absence of what humans can relate to as carnate or body.
yeah, yeah.
So, correct. Anyway, let's continue. Simultaneously with evolution of consciousness through the evolution of forms, bodies, sanskaras begin to accumulate. The evolution of form and consciousness, and with it, individualization of the human ego mind, is complete when the soul attains the human soul for the first time. But because of the accumulated sanskaras, the fully evolved consciousness of the soul remains entrapped in illusion and therefore is not directed towards the soul's self realization, God realization. Right? Let's just see the footnote. Yeah, this is a very beautiful one. I mean, sanskaras are not defined in many places, right? So I remember now that sanskaras are the habit patterns and the unconscious motivations remaining from previous actions in this and in past lives. Beautiful words. Sanskaras are the habit patterns and the unconscious motivations. It's that which makes you do something unconsciously. They are the propelling forces which so largely determine the actions of the individual and leave him so little opportunity for positive action aimed at progressive understanding and development of his own nature. So the second sentence is actually negative. It tells you what sanskaras make you lose. But then it's put out so beautifully here. So anyway, let's continue. For self-realization, all sanskaras must be completely wiped out to enable the soul as the individualized ego to be transmuted into the individualized soul in the conscious state of God. Further, the sanskaras that began to accumulate in an incarnate life have to be wiped out in an incarnate life. In order to be wiped out in toto, sanskaras must be annulled or cancelled through the process of exact equalization or perfect qualitative and quantitative balancing of all opposite sanskaras, whether good or bad. This is extremely difficult, for the sanskaras have a natural tendency towards preponderance of one opposite over the other, while unbalance of the opposite sanskaras reaches its maximum in an incarnate life. Near balancing is achieved after death during a period of disincarnate life or discarnate life through the intense subjective pleasure or suffering in the states known as heaven and hell. Each incarnate life is an opportunity for the realization of one's true self. Each death or discarnate life is an opportunity for achieving a semblance of balance to start another life with its further chance at self realization. If the opportunity were fully taken, one incarnate life could be sufficient to make the individual realize this goal. But it is well nigh impossible to attain the initiative and longing to do so without getting involved in the illusory maze of innumerable opposite experiences. The contact of a perfect master is invaluable in calling a halt to the dizzy gyrations of incarnate and discarnate lives in illusion and awakening the individual to the real knowledge of self. Please feel free to stop me if anything needs discussion at any time. From the psychological point of view, death entails no slightest curtailment of individual existence. No slightest curtailment of individual existence. This does not mean that the surviving mind remains unaffected by the kind of death which severed the individual from the body. Both the condition of the mind as well as its capability to progress further in life after death are often substantially determined by the conditions surrounding the death. So, the types of death. So, from the standpoint of its psychic after effects, death can be classified into three broad types. Number one, normal. Number two, abnormal. And number three, supernormal. Normal death follows an illness which ultimately renders the physiological functioning of the body impossible. Generally, it involves some kind of warning to the individual, for if the illness is severe, he often anticipates that death is at hand. Although by no means true of all deaths caused by illness, when the individual has some anticipation of impending death, he usually has a chance to tie up loose ends and prepare his mind for this new crisis. The second or abnormal type of death is that which results from accidents, murder, war, and suicide. In accidents and murder, there is generally no anticipation of impending death. Being unexpected, death involves in such instances a shock which can shatter the very roots of the sanskaras, seeking expression through the physical incarnation of the individual. In unanticipated accidental death, the ordinary ego mind has a moderate tendency to gravitate towards the gross sphere and cling to it because of the ego mind's attachment to the gross world. I pause here. So, in the heaven and hell state and in the life plan that one creates for the next birth, do you also introduce this accidental death as part of the plan, or is it truly unanticipated? I hope my question is clear.
The probability is that
Yeah.
it's also predestined in a way
Yeah,
because what happens in any situation, whether you're committing suicide, whether I don't know about suicide, okay. I mean, these are all only self realized people can explain, but I think any tragedy that happens, whether it's cancer or accident, dying at a very young age, it actually directly and indirectly helps this particular individual as well as the other souls connected with it, the relatives and the families. So, in a way, we all learn from any kind of tragic experience. So, I think, in a way, probabilistically speaking, these things are probably destined, in a way. Yeah, Baba. Because there is nothing like space time, there is, the whole, every life cycle is just a part of this whole complete journey of going through, wanting to get liberation. And it's anyway, it's a play because God is playing through us. Existence is playing through each soul, and each one has to go through this experience to help oneself as well as others. Okay, Baba.
Yeah, yeah.
yes, sir.
In the karma chapter in the beginning of the discourses is also there. If you have killed somebody, get ready to be killed. So it's just the same. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the specific question, what I was trying to get a comment on, and I agree with Kama, is let, let's say I die to an accident, right? So is that part of the plan? Is that predestined? The fact that I will have an unnatural death, which is sudden and unexpected, right? And I
Yeah.
agree with Kama. I believe it will be. It is.
Yes.
And
So it must be as per the
a
plan what
result, yeah,
Kamaji explained was it is good for your spiritual growth. Probably you need to be accelerated to some other
correct.
place for some experience to be passed through as sanskaras, and also around the people around you who are made to suffer because somebody's absence. You know that deep shock and sense of loss that you pass through is also a part of the sanskaric balancing process, I suppose. Yeah.
Absolutely. Both to the individual and to the others around you. Correct. Okay. Let's go to the next one, next para. In unanticipated accidental death, the ordinary ego mind has a moderate tendency to. Okay, I finished that. The last one. In anticipated abnormal death, when resulting from murder or war, the ego mind can become bound to the gross world by chains of unfulfilled revenge. There is less tendency for such binding to occur in death due to war than in resulting from murder, which is understandable. In war, the combatants on both sides are often impersonal in their actions and aware that they are fighting for some cause rather than through personal enmity. If this awareness is clear and steady, death in war does not yield the mental reaction of revenge. The reason being that you're part of a process, you're part of a thinking and a group effort, and you're just going through the motions as a part of a whole, right? And it's not led by individual motivation, but by group motivation or a cause. Now let's go to the
Yeah,
next one.
Baba. I think,
Yeah,
yeah, I think the perfect example is the Mahabharata war between the Pandavas and Kauravas, which was basically cousins fighting with each other. And I think Krishna had to come and convince Arjuna that you're not the body and you have to do your duty as a Kshatriya to defend Dharma. So nobody really dies or gets killed. They are just going through this whole process of everybody playing that role of good, bad, and ugly. And I think we had mentioned earlier about Ravana also, that Rama and Ravana, because Ravana being a very pious soul, he had done a lot of, he was a Shiva Bhakt, he was Brahmin and all that. But why did he have to take this role? it seems that one of the school of thought is that he was asked, before he took birth, do you want to go through multiple births with a smooth landing, or would you like to just go with one birth where you have to play this role of evil and you'll get moksha or liberation, by getting killed by the avatar itself? And that is one of the schools of thought about the Ramayana story, about Ravana. Jai Baba.
And through
Beautiful.
the story, so many other stories evolved, right? It's not just about Ravana, because Rama traveled across the breadth of the land, and he met so many souls and rishis and souls which are stuck on the path, he liberated. So one story has led to so many other stories, which at that point of time of the avataric age were necessary, you know. So it's
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
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 Yes, it's a web of stories. Like all of us are interlinked directly or indirectly. All souls in the universe, in as far as like in quantum physics also, they talk about that.
correct,
Yeah.
right.
the individualization is only a construct. We are all the same. Yeah. Among abnormal kinds of death, suicide deserves special attention. Suicide may be divided into four grades: lowest, low, high, and highest. The lowest type is a last measure in escaping punishment or ignominy or utter frustration after the individual has tried unscrupulously to satisfy his own selfish desires. Thus, one who has committed murder for lust or power may commit suicide when he is caught. Even after leaving the body, such a person does not succeed in severing his link with the gross world for hundreds of years. These individuals live literally as ghosts in the semi subtle sphere which lies between the gross and subtle world. They experience agonizing suffering because of their unfulfilled desires. Due to the link which they preserve with the gross world, they continue to desire various gross objects keenly, a desire which can never be fulfilled. This suffering is even more acute than the intense sufferings in the hell state that the individual experiences after he severs his connection with the gross world. There's an asterisk on hell state. Neither hell nor heaven should be regarded as places. They are mental states and imaginary in the same sense that the world of duality also exists in the realm of illusion. See below, it says. Oh, that's described in the next page. So we'll come back to it. Yeah. A somewhat less acute class of suffering in imagination is experienced in the hell state by suicides who have been slightly better motivated, but who are still classified as low. In this group are those motivated by sheer disgust with life. Thus, a person suffering from bad health or stricken by a loathsome disease, or one who is poverty stricken and ashamed of being a burden on others, might put an end to his life through lack of will to live. Since the cause of such a suicide is revulsion from earthly life, the ego mind does not continue to maintain any enduring link with the gross world beyond the normal 3 or 4 days following death. After that normal period, the link is snapped and the ego mind then begins to experience the intense suffering of its bad sanskaras, usually termed the hell state. Although a ghost caught in the semi subtle sphere suffers even more acutely than does the ego mind experiencing the hell state, the latter achieves some exhaustion of evil sanskaras while the former does not. So the ghost caught in semi subtle sphere suffers even more, but the ego mind experiencing the hell state achieves some exhaustion of evil sanskaras. So when you're experiencing and recapping the life that you have experienced in the hell during the hell state, you're actually exhausting some sanskaras. Further, the sufferings of the ghosts who maintain their link with the earthly life are more tantalizing because the link constantly holds before them the prospect of fulfillment of gross desires without actual means for their satisfaction. So they are still connected to the gross world, hoping to fulfill their desires, but they have no capacity or means to complete that. They want some emotional fulfillment. They want a physical object. They want a achievement, and they are not able to complete it. That's the life of the ghosts. Oh, we can also rotate reading. Anybody wants to volunteer, please let me know. The general belief that yeah, the general belief
Continue, continue.
that's yeah, yeah. The general belief that suicide is bad is due to the fact that it is usually the result of low motives or a cowardly attitude towards life. When suicide is employed as an escape from dilemmas brought on by failure to cope with the needs of life, it is not only ignoble but far reaching as well in its demoralizing effects upon the victim. The third or high type of suicide is in no way rooted
Jai
in
Baba.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Um, as maybe I should let you complete this third type of suicide, but I think here again is an interesting question of whether it is predestined or it's a matter of free will or power of choice. So we have this dichotomy. Where does free will or power of choice comes into play, and where does fate or destiny comes into play? So the only way I can look at it is that in the big picture of life, from the time a individual soul is born, going through the, let's say, 84-year cycle, 84 years in each life cycle, going through the 7 stages of life or 4 stages, that part is almost predictable in a way, in a sense, where you are born, what kind of life you want to do, and all that on a macro level. So that is like a predestined thing, fate, based on your karma and sanskaras. But on the free will power of choice, the way I have observed is like here in this kind of situation, do I take the right road or the left road? Do I take the right path or the left path? And also, I quote this Krishnamurti sentence where he said, the only thing in life you can do is brush your teeth better than the last time you did. So, there you have that free will or power of choice, or what we call as self awareness. And I'll give you another practical example. Very recent now here, I'm actually in Mathura Vrindavan, okay? And there are a lot of monkeys. So in the Vrindavan old town, you have to be very careful with your cell phone and not only that, spectacles. Day before yesterday, 3 times my spectacles, like I had to replace my spectacle, believe it or not. I found that the monkey grabbed it. Like, you're walking and you don't know how the spectacles is,
Wow.
they just come and grab it. So I had to go to the store and get a new frame. At least the funny thing is that you have to give a fruity drink. You buy a fruity, and the guy is munching away with the spectacle frame and all that, scratching it, and he's sitting there. Or if you're lucky, or he's running away with it. So the first instance, I had to like wait for 15-20 minutes because he had disappeared. And I was thinking, okay, I have to now go get a new spec, or I had a spare thing in my suitcase. But then one guy turned up, okay. He said, like, wait, I'll go check it out. And he said, you pay me $100 if I get you your spectacles. So he then tells me to get a fruity, thing for 20 rupees. And then he finds the monkey. And of course, the frame is broken, but the lenses are still there, like clinging onto the broken frame. So he gets it. And then I get the frame done. And again, when I go to another temple, another monkey grabbed this new one. Like again, I had to go through the process. Now, this is real monkey business. Now, what is the lesson do you learn from it? See, they kept saying like, don't wear your specs, but I can't see long distance. So yesterday, when I was talking to the hotel guy, he gave me a beautiful example. He said, like, what the monkey business is like. What is it telling you? Is that you have to be aware, alert. That's what the word he used. You have to be alert all the time. Okay, and it reminds me of what Baba said in Discourses. He said, the spiritual journey is not for the faint hearted. It's not like riding on a saddled horse. It's like walking on the edge of a sharp sword every moment. So, the lesson I learned from this in a positive way is I have to be aware all the time, just not in Vrindavan, but like to be self aware every moment when you're awake, wherever you are, it's like being Baba awareness kind of thing. So anyway, just afterthought. But the question of suicide is about is it free will or destiny? It definitely seems to be free will, as it says. Like if you do a cowardly act, and if you relate to the chapters on violence and non-violence, the two chapters in discourses where Baba clearly tells you where violence can be used and where non-violence works. Jai Baba.
Very good question.
Very.
Though the monkey business, I sympathize with you, and may not be directly related to the free will, but surely is related to the awareness that one needs to carry in every minute. That's a very good analogy. Uh, but coming back to your point on free will, I think we have discussed this even in the past. I think Baba clearly says there's nothing like free will. But if you take the specific example of the suicide, especially the low and the lowest, it's very clear that it is the misuse of the limited free will that exists. So, like you said, Kama, there is only a limited free will. Free will is not really free in the sense it does not come with unbounded possibilities. You make the choices within
Yeah.
a limited context. There is a predefined context that is set for you. So, in that sense, it's not a unbounded freedom that you enjoy with your will as a human. But a classic example of misuse of free will is suicide, right? Where you're doing the worst possible thing using the freedom. Yeah, Sanjay ji.
Yeah. It's a very complexing discussion actually. So there is a free will. I mean, I can choose to drive carefully or I can be careless, and there my chances of accident increase. I do my repentance prayer because I have not done the right things during the day. Maybe I have hurt somebody. I have not thought properly or acted properly. So that means there is a free will which I should have exercised and I have not exercised. And that's why I ask for forgiveness from Baba. So, I mean, I don't have any words to add, but it is very complex thing to understand. That's what I
Yeah,
feel.
yeah, it's pretty intriguing. So if you take that, if you dissect that simple example of driving, right? I would dare say that though you're saying it's an exercise of your free will in choosing to drive recklessly or to drive as a good driver, is also
Yeah.
driven by sanskaras. So where is the use of free will? I would argue, right? So,
So because
so your
if I
son.
assume that everything is happening out of my own sanskaras, then
Mhm.
my motivation to act rightly typically goes
Is
down.
constrained.
Even if it
Correct.
is true, I would like to assume that I
That
have
you have
to act
some free will.
properly. Yeah.
But your second point is
Uh,
very thoughtful in the sense that repentance is an example of repenting on what? On use of free will. So that's a beautiful point. If Baba has put a lot of importance, has given a lot of importance to repentance prayer, what does that indicate? That indicates something, right? It indicates that you are doing something wrong, and that's why you're repenting for it. And what is wrong? and, or what is that? It's probably wrong use of free will. Beautiful point that you bring up on the second note.
Jai
Ashish.
Baba, one more point. One more
Yeah.
point about driving is a perfect example because I have been with Sanjay, so I can definitely I have observed his driving. But apart from that, the thing is when you're driving on the road, you will meet a lot of rash drivers. Okay, and definitely the conditioned mind is to react or respond. So I use this as a perfect example of an animate encounter where when you're driving and before you knew about sanskaras and intelligent action and unintelligent action, your free will makes you react in a very angry manner. You give galis and all that stuff. But after you come to Baba and understand the concept of intelligent action, unwinding samskaras and not reacting vis-a-vis, I'm sorry, intelligent action and unwinding samskaras and unintelligent action, which is spending samskara, that is reacting to your past conditioning, then that is where the self-awareness comes. And this is where the free will also works out here. You have a free will where you can react unintelligently because you are ignorant of the fact or because of your past conditioning, or you have the free will of acting intelligently by not reacting to a rash driver. So there are specific examples where you see free will makes a difference, but in the big picture, of course, there is nothing like free will, as you rightly said. Jai Baba.
Yeah, but intriguing examples on both sides. Intelligent action, unintelligent action is a exercise of free will. Repentance prayer is a strong a case for existence of some sort of freedom in the will, in the use of will. So please think on and meditate upon this to get to the bottom of what is the true nature of free will. Ashish, over to you. You have a question.
Yeah. So yeah, Mister, I have some different question about the suicide. So there used
Yeah,
to be
please.
many sons or some people they used to take the samadhi, right? Samadhi is nothing but again the suicide. Means even till 16th or 17th century, many saints took the samadhi. Even just couple of years back, if you know, there was a news. There was a
Yes,
group
yes,
suicide
yes.
happened. Group suicide
Correct.
happened, and
Group
that was only
suicide.
for the, just
Okay.
to get the God. Yeah, that was
Hmm.
only to get the God. They have written, we wanted to go for the God. That's why we are doing the suicide. So there are two different flavors. One is samadhi and one is the suicide. So how we will take it for that? Means for that kind of suicide, is it acceptable or it's because the thought process is totally different, right? Thought process is just to gain the God. So in that case, what we should say on that part?
So again, it depends on the specific example, right? So if it is to gain God, is it with the sanskaric clarity that you have exhausted all that you have to do in this birth, and there's nothing left to be done, and you offer yourself to suicide with real knowledge, with intelligent action, with awareness of sanskaras, and with the guidance of a perfect master, then I think it's right. But in most cases, it may be a play of illusion itself. You may think that by offering yourself to samadhi, you're getting to some place because you think that ending the life of this body in that way will get you moksha or get you God realization or get you to God or so on. So in most cases, I don't think it's like suicide. It's unintelligent action. Actually, is my humble opinion. I don't think Baba has commented on Jiva Samadhi. What you're referring to is a concept called Jiva Samadhi, where the
Yeah,
person willingly submits himself to death, right? So there are
yeah,
examples of
yes.
many masters doing that. I'm
Many
surprised
masters.
at the
Santan Naneshwar in Maharashtra,
yes,
Paitan, maybe it's very famous place, right? That Santa Naneshwar and the Naneshwar is very similar to Bhagavad Gita. So Santa
mm,
Naneshwar, he
mm,
took that Jiva Samadhi. He went to one
J-
cave, he sat down there,
correct.
and then he, yeah, something like that.
Jai Baba.
Yeah, Jai Baba. Salam
Uh,
alaikum, Begum.
I wanted to share, while we are talking about death, In both the cases of my father and father-in-law, I think there is a part to play by the individual in leaving the body. They could go when they were ready to leave the body. Both my I saw that, once they were not holding on and then they submitted themselves to divinity, they were able to leave the body. I feel towards the end there is little bit control in our hands. When we are ready, we can leave. I mean, that's my observation. I don't know whether it's true for everyone else, but these two cases I observed closely, and both of them, when they were ready, in my mother-in-law's case, she gave him permission to go, and then in like 5 6 hours, he was holding on to, I think, perhaps, that she's my responsibility boy. So she spoke to him, and in a few hours he was gone. My father also, he would just look into the horizon and he says, in Kashmiri, he would say, "Okay, I'm ready, take me." And I thought that, and in my father-in-law's case, what had happened is he had lost his memory, and he was not in his present state. So I posted Baba's posters around the whole room while he was ailing. And my intention was that if he gets to see Baba and he's able to communicate something for him to either get better or whatever Baba wills. And I mean, I don't know whether that helped, but that was also because sometimes when bodies and minds and souls are not aligned, when your health doesn't permit, then also I think the family has to aid in letting the soul pass peacefully. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you, Jai Baba.
Jay Baba, I think you bring up an important point, but like you said also, it's not everybody that has that level of sensitivity and acceptance. So it's
Yes.
a combination of both, right? You have to A, accept the inevitability of death and probably the timing of it in the personal context of your life journey. And second is accept it and rather almost welcome it, right? Saying, yes, now I'm done, I'm ready. A lot of people fight it, and a lot of people are anxious uh, or fearful of death, and that actually prolongs it. And I say that again from uh,
Yes.
personal experience where I've seen that happen, right? And
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen that happen. I mean, I cannot get into the details of it, but I know I know it very closely where that took very long, and that explains the behavior of some of the souls where they are not able to reconcile to what happens, right? So I think overall, it's specific to the individual person's awareness and evolution or involution process and the sanskaras of the person. But thanks for that comment. Yeah, let's
Another
go
thing
ahead.
to pick up is,
Sure.
as Baba lovers, we go through this anticipatory journey, and some stuff stays with us, some doesn't. I think we should make a note in our head that this should stay for us. If we are done, we are done. We shouldn't be attached to this body. This body is just for us. When everything
Absolutely.
else is done or the body is not giving, you say, "Okay, Baba, do as you please. I'm ready." So when you submit yourself either in body to do other things or to leave the body, then it's very easy to live because you are not bound or scared of, this thing is not working, that thing is giving me pain, this situation is not the way it should be. You lead a freer life knowing that, I've submitted myself, this body which is just a vehicle, and this soul which is him to him, and then you just move on and do whatever is in your best capacity. So this, I think like that, and it has freed me in many many ways. Many difficult situations which are kind of, I don't know how to handle them, but when I talk to Baba and I say, "Okay, this body, this soul, these difficulties, these are yours," I submit and then I float. It's almost like floating in water. and it gives you a lot of strength, and you see life in a very different perspective. And and as a soul you grow also, you see that, yeah, you detach yourself from the body, and you know that Baba is there, the light is there, and he has your well-being in his heart. And he has also, there's destiny, there's a bunch of sanskaras, and when you submit to him, whatever is going odd, you still, like, he will do the best for you, and the best does happen, because you're not becoming a hindrance in manifesting something which you don't want it. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you very much, Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba, I'll provoke you further. I would say that as Baba lovers, every morning when we get up, we should thank that we did not pass away in the previous night. We should submit ourselves. No, we should submit ourselves at his feet to be ready to do what he wants us to do.
Yes, yes,
Lead the next interval of time till we get back to sound sleep that night in a way where
yes,
we perform intelligent action and
yes,
invite more of him to our life, right? So instead of course, we should do what you said, which is be ready to give it when it's there. But I would say every day is a gift, and
yes,
quite honestly, I think a lot of us felt this way, and I probably feel less of it now, but I felt that way very strongly during the peak of COVID, right? I was
yes,
really thankful every morning, saying, "Okay, so thank you, thanks for another day," right? So,
yeah,
unfortunately, that's classic Smashana Vairagya, right? When you see
yeah,
death all around you, you become aware and become very spiritual. But then you lose it gradually and become thinking again that you are invincible. You are not. Every morning is a gift.
yes,
Every morning when you wake up from the reality and discover you're actually the same Karthik and all the sanskaras come back, it's a gift.
yeah. Let me also say this: once you have submitted yourself to Baba, whether it is today's day he gives you, or the another day in another body, you're still okay, you know. So that could be a gift also. Of course, we have to be grateful to be in this body and continue what we have, and we still want to live and be useful and enjoy life. But the thing is, okay, if didn't wake up today, okay, no problem, I will wake up in another body, and Baba would have something good for me. So that further
Absolutely.
frees
Absolutely.
you. Yeah, Baba.
In, interesting conversations. Morbid, but we are all dealing with it so beautifully. I think we have gotten better at it over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah,
For,
we are.
for sure.
This conversation was to die for.
That's a good one. Okay, let's continue.
Thank
The
you,
third,
Jai Baba.
the Jai Baba. Third type of suicide. The third or high type of suicide is in no way rooted in inferior motives and is therefore free of their deteriorating effects. It is inspired by altruistic motives alone and is a sacrifice made to secure the material or spiritual well-being of others. Ashish. One who meets death through, example, a hunger strike in order to better the welfare of the masses is a suicide of this high type. But if you see the previous statement, it answers your question, Ashish. So the third type, which is nothing but uh, high, okay? The high is also for spiritual well-being of others or themselves, right? This is of the third type. The motives of such a suicide are not far different from those of martyrs who lay down their lives on the battlefield for country, society, or religion. The total absence of base motives in this high type of suicide makes it entirely different from the lower grades. As in other noble acts of self effacement, such highly motivated action entitles the departed individual to the privileges and pleasures of the heavenly state and also constitutes a definite asset in his spiritual ongoing. A suicide inspired by ordinarily altruistic motives is not the highest type. The fourth or highest class results from intense desire to see God or to unite with Him. This is an extremely rare occurrence. In most cases in which suicide is believed to have been committed for the sake of God, there is an admixture of other motivating factors, such as dissatisfaction with the conditions of earthly life. If and when suicide is embraced purely for the sake of attaining God, it can have the effect of achieving liberation or mukti. The masters have always warned aspirants against resorting to suicide in the intensity of their longing for union with God, for there is too great room for self deception and inadvertent admixture of inferior unconscious motivation. Wow. So your answers are all here, Ashish. So it
Yeah.
is the highest form. It is the highest form. But as he says in the last paragraph, it should be not linked to the ego. It should be guided by, ideally, by a perfect master, or you should be at a situation where you know that it is not for self deception or does not include admixture of inferior unconscious motivation. So it's with a lot of care that one should resort to this if you're doing it for reaching God. Continuing, regardless of the abnormality of the circumstances which may lie back of it, no type of death can really damn the individual forever. It is never more than an incident in his long spiritual journey. The third or supernormal type of death consists in leaving the body voluntarily. This is done by the advanced yogis who wind up their earthly careers after fulfilling their mission, much as the student locks up his textbooks after passing his examination. The supernormal or voluntary death of the advanced yogi is definitely anticipated and willed, but is entirely different from suicide insofar as motives, results, and manner of leaving the body are concerned. So now, what you're saying, I would say that it's more supernormal if the person is a yogi or an advanced yogi, and it's not even a suicide. If it is the group kind of suicide that you were describing, if it is led by intelligent action with the refinement and awareness that it's not an escape and it's not linked to the ego, then it could be treated as the highest form of suicide. But in most cases, it may not, right? So that's, I think, uh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
have to say. Yeah. Yeah. Continuing on, friends and relatives of a departed one often are seriously upset by his death because dissolution of the form may seem to them to be the extinction of life itself. All of their attachments had been related to the form. It was because of the form that they had contact with the soul, and it was through the form that their various physical and emotional needs were fulfilled. The disappearance of the body that had acted as the vehicle of the soul is therefore often interpreted by them as the annihilation of the individual himself. From the purely physical point of view, death does not involve annihilation of even the body, but physiologically it has become unfit to be the continued dwelling place of the spirit and has therefore lost all importance. From the point of view of the individualized soul as mind, death does not involve any loss whatsoever, as the mind and all its sanskaras remain intact. The individual, in essence, is thus in no way different. He has only cast off his external coat. Nevertheless, the severance from the physical body is fraught with two important consequences. It is a means of introducing the individual to a new type of existence, and it is also in itself an incident of the utmost importance because of side effects of the greatest practical consequence. When others die, the individual loses only one or at most a few friends who have played an important role in his earthly existence. But when he dies, he loses at one stroke all the persons who had entered intimately into his own life. He also loses all his possessions and is broken away from the achievements on which he had built the very foundations of his sense of accomplishment in life. As the crowning touch, he must also leave behind the very physical body with which he had identified himself so completely that he was rarely capable of imagining himself as anything but that physical body. This complete annihilation of the entire structure of the individual's earthly existence is therefore a crisis without parallel in his life. This critical turning point, which occurs at death, is attended by both advantages and disadvantages. The greatest disadvantage lies in the fact that the individual must leave incomplete all the undertakings of his earthly life. He must leave the entire chessboard without taking any further interest in it. The scene of his life is blotted out, and the chain of his mundane interests is hacked apart. From the standpoint of objective achievement, the continuity of his undertaking has undergone an abrupt break. Advancement of the projects he has left behind must come from his previous associates and can no longer be his concern. It is rare for the individual to be drawn back through a sanskaric linking to the identical task which he had begun in a past incarnation to develop it on from the point where his successors had left it. It would be a mistake to think that death brings nothing but disadvantages. Death also brings about a general weakening of attachments by shattering all the sanskaras which were fed by the earthly objects because the mind is now torn away from them. While it is true that many of the sadhanas undertaken by the individual during an earthly life have the effect of unwinding previous sanskaras, still, it is only in the extremely rare instances that he succeeds in completely erasing the present and future effects of these sanskaras. This erasure is effected within certain well defined limits by the sudden transplanting of the individual that occurs at death. Sadhana, devotional and disciplinary practices. If the lessons inherent in a single death were to be thoroughly assimilated by the individual, he would benefit by the equivalent of several lifetimes of patient spiritual effort. Unfortunately, this does not happen in most cases because after death, the individual usually tries to revive his accumulated sanskaras. Through these revived sanskaras, he recaptures the experiences through which he has already lived. The period immediately following death usually becomes, therefore, an occasion for the repetition of all that has previously been lived through, rather than a period of emancipation through understanding all that has been lived out. Regardless of these shortcomings, death does give a severe shaking to the tree of sanskaras, root, trunk, and branch. And this impels the mind to revise. Ashok, you have to mute. I'll restart. Regardless of these shortcomings, death does give a severe shaking to the tree of sanskaras, root, trunk, and branch. And this impels the mind to revise its attitude toward the objective universe. Death also facilitates a certain amount of disentanglement from the attractive world of form. The individual is never able to go back to earth without some modification of his approach to life. Life in a new physical body must conform to lines determined by the individual's sanskaras. Thus, there is often a close resemblance to the past life on earth, but it's not a literal repetition of the past. It is a new experiment. This readjustment of outlook, which is facilitated by the abrupt reorientation involved in death, is particularly helpful when it occurs after spiritual aspiration has been awakened to the further flowering of spiritual aspiration. Sorry, I didn't read that right. This readjustment of outlook, which is facilitated by the abrupt reorientation involved in death, is particularly helpful when it occurs after spiritual aspiration has been awakened in the individual. In such cases, the loosening of all attachment, which occurs at death, is very conducive to the further flowering of spiritual aspiration. The aspirant now has a chance, under fresh circumstances, to remodel the entire pattern of his life in line with his spiritual aspirations. Because of these special opportunities which death offers, the aspirant does not regret his own death. For him, death is not a cloud without its silver lining. The perfect master, Jalaluddin Rumi, has said that he always progressed through frequent deaths. But this cannot justify anyone, and even less a spiritual aspirant, in seeking death for its own sake. To seek death in this manner is to put a false premium upon it. Such seeking of death springs from fear of life and from failure to cope with it, and inevitably must defeat its own purpose. If death has any value, it is to teach the individual the true art of life. It would be wrong for the aspirant to seek death with the hope of making further progress thereby. On the other hand, he should not fear death when it overtakes him. A true aspirant neither seeks death nor fears it, and when death comes to him, he converts it into a stepping stone to the higher life. Some people are particularly afraid of the exact moment of death because they anticipate unbearable pain at that instant. In reality, all physical suffering experienced during illness or just before death terminates at the moment of death. The process of the actual dropping of the body is quite painless, contrary to the superstition that a person experiences indescribable agonies in death. However, the severing of the individual's emotional entanglement in the gross world is not found to be easy. The various religious rites observed after a death have primarily the purpose of helping the departing individual disentangle himself from these ties. For instance, the repetition of the name of God or of scriptures, often practiced after the death of a person, has a wholesome effect both on those who have been left behind as well as on the person who has passed away, because they help to free both parties of their mutual sanskaric attachment to form. On the other hand, the lamentation and wailing that is often observed has a degrading and depressing effect both on those left behind as well as the person who has passed away, for it tends to strengthen mutual attachment to form. The thought or wish the dying individual holds at the moment of death has special importance in determining his future destiny. If the last thought is of God or the master, the individual achieves liberation. It is quite common for an individual not to have any specific thought at the moment of death. Even if he has had thoughts or wishes before death, he will tend to forget them at the time of death. At that moment, some people hope they may not return to earthly life, but they are not exempted from rebirth by mere wishing. They are reborn, but exhibit a pronounced disgust for life and tend to lead the lives of ascetics or recluses. If the good and evil sanskaras of the individual are most are almost balanced at the time of death, he may take on a new physical body almost immediately. He may even enter a new incarnation as early as the fourth day after death. In such urgent cases, the rebirth of the individual can enliven a ready fetus any time between the sixth and seventh month of embryological development. It is important to note that both father and mother give only prana or vital energy to the fetus. In addition to receiving prana, it must be enlivened by some individualized soul. Ordinarily, this takes place during the later stages of embryological development. There was a footnote on good and bad. Good actions leave sanskaric residues in the individual's subconscious as surely as do bad actions. Therefore, the individual may be bound just as surely by the golden chains forged by good actions as by the iron chains of bad actions. Okay. Any thoughts? Any questions? So, sixth month onwards, the soul gets linked to an embryo. Let's continue. When the individual is ready for reincarnation, he is automatically drawn to his future parents by sanskaric links. The parents act as a magnet due to their previous connections with the reincarnating individual. Occasionally, the strongest karmic or sanskaric link which the reincarnating individual has with incarnate individuals is not with the parents, but with a brother or sister. It is this link, then, that determines the family in which he takes birth. In times of emergency, as in wars or epidemics, when thousands of individuals may seek immediate reincarnation, it is not always possible for all to be born into families having strong previous links with them. But if the sanskaric status of the individual is precipitating him toward incarnation, his taking on of a body is not postponed merely because parents are not available to provide a suitable previous link. It is possible through the intervention of the masters to make infinite adjustments through mutual exchanges. Death is like throwing away clothes which have become useless through wear and tear. Just as a traveler may stop at different places and at each halt may change clothes according to his needs, so the individual goes on changing his bodies according to the needs of his sanskaras. Death may also be compared to sleep. When a man goes to sleep, he wakes up in the same physical body. When he drops his physical body at death, he wakes up in another physical body. For most persons, the period between death and birth is one of absorption in subjectivity. As mentioned before, after death, the ego mind of the individual normally retains its tie with the remnants of the physical body for 3 or 4 days. After this period, the connection is completely severed, and the individual then exists entirely in the subjectivity of his mental states. This subjective phase is brought about by the resurrection of all the sanskaras which the ego mind has brought along with it after death. The sudden transplanting of the ego mind from one sphere to another does wear out the scars of the sanskaras to some extent, but for the greater part, they remain intact. If death had resulted in the complete wiping out of all the sanskaric scars on the mind, it would have resulted in emancipation of the individual from all limitation. But this does not happen. Not only are the sanskaric imprints retained after death, but they may unroll unhampered in the life after death. As the sanskaric sheet is unwound, the individual experiences in the hell or heaven state the sufferings or pleasures embodied in the bad or good sanskaras. Every individual has both classes in his store, and his mental state in the life after death is determined by which one of these preponderates. The intensity of the sufferings or pleasures which the individual experiences through these revived sanskaras is so great that a greater exhaustion of these sanskaras is brought about during a relatively short period than is possible in hundreds of years of suffering or pleasure in earthly life. It is these posthumous mental states of intense suffering and pleasure which are respectively known in religious literature as hell and heaven. In popular belief, they are incorrectly regarded as places or spheres. It is more appropriate to speak of a hell state or heaven state rather than places. When there is a preponderance of evil sanskaras at death, the individual gradually exhausts the bad sanskaras through suffering in the hell state. The result is that the evil sanskaras eventually tend to strike a balance with the good sanskaras. It is as if a huge block of ice were placed on one pan of a balance, causing it to sink because of its excess over a smaller weight contained on the counterbalance pan. As the great block of ice is gradually melted and the water spills, there is a tendency for the two pans to come into balance. Beautiful analogy. An ice on one side, and slowly it melts, and the water falls out of the pan, and then it becomes lighter and lighter. Similarly, as the mass of evil sanskaras become attenuated through suffering, their preponderance begins to vanish and they almost come into balance with the good sanskaras. This moment, when the two opposite types of sanskaras are almost in a state of balance, is the moment when the afterlife of the individual terminates and he finds himself precipitating into a new physical incarnation on earth. He's precipitated into a new physical body because no further purpose is served by continuation of his subjective absorption in the discarnate life. He is ripe to accumulate fresh experience in another gross body, and for this purpose, he must adopt a vehicle which is suitable for the working out of his unexhausted sanskaras. I think we'll take a pause here because there's quite a few pages before we can conclude this. Okay, so any thoughts before we wrap up? Like we'll wrap up at this point and continue on the idea of death for those who survive the week from now to next. I'm in a morbid joking mode. Any thoughts, any ideas, any comments, any questions?
Kartik, I think these are heavy materials, so now we're out of time. But from next week, we should actually read a little bit like slower, not to necessarily wrap it up, and then pause and reflect on it. These are very unknown and mysterious stuff,
Deep,
and it's
deep,
good
deep,
to,
yes.
yeah. That's
No,
just
no,
a suggestion.
yeah, so I was hoping for the same, but nobody had comments and questions. But we did have some very interesting conversation in maybe you joined late. We did stop and comment and discuss quite a bit. But I agree with you. This is even deeper and more complicated when compared to discourses, both in language and content. And each of these paras are worthy of deeper reflection and discussion and thought. We'll go slower, no doubt.
Yeah. The
And what
reason
we
is
face every day around.
yeah.
Yeah, this is something we face every day around. So
True.
What
much
was
more.
that?
Yeah, we
What
face
didn't
this subject on a daily basis, actually. So much more
daily
in that sense
basis? So
relevant. Yeah, yeah.
we die and born every day. You mean?
No, we see it around us. We see it around
Yeah, yeah.
us.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, in society, and not so often we see it very close in our family context. We see it, and I'm sure all of us have experienced. You just hear of somebody dying to an accident, or somebody just recounting something that they saw which led to a death. It might be somebody of a stranger, but the reaction to death is not the same as the reaction to any other piece of news that we listen to, right? And that's the enigma of death. Like Baba says, it's an enigma because it makes you think. So it can be a combination of things like fear, mystery, or anxiety, or the application of, oh, when will that happen to me? All of these things happen to us when we hear about death, right? But that's what.
No, yeah, actually, I I don't really care because it's all in God's hands. I don't think about that stuff. But yeah, it's good to know that what happened to us when we drop our this gross body, and what would happen in between till we find time to come back again. Yeah, there was actually it's interesting stuff in here. Just very briefly, I make a comment. Sometimes, we were talking with a friend several years ago, and he was saying, yeah, sometimes you have to reincarnate, and the one that you have a strong link that you could choose for as a father or mother, and you particularly incarnate in one family because of one brother or one sister. And I often thought about it, which one is it for me? But if they are not ready, they're occupied with 6, 7, 8, whatever children, you just have to born, you have to take a body. Just you born in a family which you don't have a lot of relation or past experience with them, or so if we are in the family where we don't find a lot of bonding between us and the member of the families or brothers and sisters, spiritually, it could be that we don't have a lot of past connection with these people. Yeah, so it's something to consider. Anyway,
Sure.
there's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah. In my case, I'm very sure. I have a very strong connection I had with my brother. He's no more, but I think
Mm,
there was something very deep there for sure. I'm very sure of it.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
that's wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Jay
Let's,
Baba.
yeah, we are way out of time. So thank you very much. I thought this was a very, very lovely reading with all the discussions and comments. Uh, have a great week ahead. And like I said, let's look forward to next week's reading. We'll go slower on the and discuss a lot more.
Yeah, that'll be great. What is the name
Jai
of this
Baba.
chapter, Kartik? What's the name of
Yeah,
this chapter? Sorry,
death,
I
death
know we're doing
and
a little.
immortality.
Oh,
Death
death and
and
immortality. Yeah,
death
of
and
course.
immortality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
All right.
Thank you
Thank you
for
very
all the
much.
work
Jai Baba.
involving
Jai
here. Jay
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jay
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.